On a warm Saturday afternoon in late September of 1997, a 41-year-old mother of two was out enjoying her passions in the woods when she had an absolutely terrifying experience that took her years to recover from. But before we get into her encounter, welcome back to Dark Wilderness. If you've had an encounter with anything unexplained that you would like to have shared on the show, please email me at the link below. And if you like today's story, please gently slap that like button. And next time you're out in the woods and you're getting chased by an unknown creature, slap that subscribe button, throw it on the ground as a distraction so you and whatever's chasing you don't miss out on any future content. Now, let's get into today's encounter. Today's encounter comes from Helen, and it took place on a Saturday in late September of 1997 while she was out mushroom hunting out in the Agassiz Provincial Forest in eastern Manitoba. Helen at the time was 41 years old. She had two children, one was 17 and one was 14. She had grew up in Beausejour, Manitoba, which is a small town located just northeast of Winnipeg. However, at this point in time, her and her husband and her children were living in Winnipeg, and their number one thing to do in the fall every weekend was go out mushroom picking as a family. It was something that Helen had grew up doing when she was a kid, something her husband had grew up doing as well, and they wanted to pass that down to their children. However, this particular weekend, her husband had to work, and both of her kids, being 17 and 14, they wanted to spend time with their friends, and they weren't really feeling going out into the woods with mom. So Helen was trying to decide if she wanted to go out solo for this mushroom hunt, or if she was just going to stay home. However, on the Friday night, she really decided, you know what, it's been an incredibly long week. I need to get out, kind of blow some steam off. So she told her husband that she was going to head out to the Agassiz Provincial Forest the next morning to go mushroom hunting. Her husband was not really too fond of that idea with her going out into the woods all alone. They had always gone as a family, and he was just not really comfortable with the thought of his wife wandering around in the forest by herself, just because there are a lot of bears in this part of the province. And with that time of the year, the bears are trying to eat as much as they can to fatten up for the winter. He was really concerned about her. So he told her that if she went the next day, that she had to take one of the rifles with her. She agreed to this. So that morning she woke up. She woke up at about 5:30 in the morning. She had a quick breakfast, grabbed all of her stuff, and as she was making her way out of the house, she remembered that she promised her husband that she would take a rifle. So she went back into the house, went into the gun safe. She was looking at their rifles and their shotguns, and she decided that she did not want to have to carry around a big, heavy, high-caliber rifle or a big, heavy shotgun. So she chose to bring her Marlin lever-action .22. Helen knew that a .22 was not going to do a whole lot of good against a bear aside from just tick it off. But she was kind of hoping that, you know what, maybe just the sound of the .22 would be enough to scare a bear off or scare off a wolf or a cougar. So she grabbed the .22 from the gun safe, locked it up, and she headed out to her car. Once she was in her car, she made the hour-long trip east of the city to the Agassiz Forest. The Agassiz Forest is located about an hour east of Winnipeg, and it runs between Highway 15 and Highway 44. It actually extends a little bit north of 44 as well. The area is incredibly dense. It's full of swamps and just incredibly thick bush. There's a couple of quad trails and fire trails that go through this area as well, and it's a popular place for mushroom pickers in the fall. Once Helen got to where the turnoff is into the Agassiz Forest, it's pretty much just a little gravel road that runs off the highway, kind of in a U shape, and there's a road that leads off of that. She parked her car right at the entrance to the forest, got out, grabbed all of her stuff, locked her car. She started walking down this fire trail into the woods. As she made her way down this trail, she kept looking off to the side of the road, trying to see if she could see any mushrooms. Periodically, she would catch a glimpse of a redcap just off the trail, so she'd go in, pick the mushroom, and then she'd carry on her way. She did this for a few hours, and she was about 2 miles away from her vehicle when she came to a spot of the trail that goes down into a ravine. On the right-hand side was incredibly boggy and marshy, but on the left-hand side was completely dry. And she spotted a big cluster of redcaps about 30 yards into the bush. So she went off the trail, went up to that cluster of mushrooms, and she started to pick them. As she was picking them, she noticed about 20 yards past that, there was another big cluster, and even further past that, there was more. She was figuring that she had just hit the jackpot for redcaps, and she was really excited, so she just kept carrying off into the woods, picking mushrooms and filling her bag as she went. After a little while, she realized that she had gone pretty far off the main trail. She had gone about 250 yards from it. And at this point, she was kind of starting to get a little bit nervous because she's fairly far off that trail. She did not want to risk getting lost. So she figured, you know what, even though there's so many mushrooms, I'm going to make my way back to the trail and I'll just take a look on the sides of the road as I make my way back to my car. I do not want to get lost. So she turned around and she started making her way back to the trail. She had only made it about 10 yards when all of a sudden, off to her left, about 100 yards into the trees, she heard what sounded like somebody yelling, "Help me." So at this point, she completely stopped what she was doing and just tried to listen, trying to figure out if that is what she heard or if it was something else that she heard and she just thought that it was somebody yelling help. So she stood for a few seconds and then she heard that voice again from the same direction yell, "Help me," a second time. At this point, she's thinking that there's somebody hurt in the woods or somebody's lost. So she decides she's going to yell out, "Where are you?" So she yells it out and there was no response. After a few seconds, she yelled it out again and still no response. So she was kind of trying to figure out what she was going to do, if she should start heading towards this voice or if she should yell out again, when all of a sudden she heard the voice again from that same area. So now she's thinking that, maybe she's not yelling loud enough. Maybe this person's hard of hearing. So she decided she was going to use her .22. She remembered the hunter's distress signal, which is 3 quick shots into the air. And she figured, you know what, I'm not in distress, but this person obviously is. Maybe if I fire the .22, that'll be loud enough for them to hear and they'll be able to find their way to me. So she unshouldered the .22, she fired 3 shots into the air, and then she just stood there and listened. After about 20 seconds, she did not hear anything, so she fired 3 more shots into the air, and then she heard this person yell, "Help me," again. However, it was not directly from her left this time. It was from her left, but further behind her. At this point, she was trying to figure out why this person would have heard these shots and chose to move further away rather than come directly to her. And it kind of made her feel a bit uneasy because now she was starting to wonder, is this a trap? Is this person up to no good? And she decided that her best course of action would be to head right back to the trail, get to her car, alert the RCMP, and send help. So she yelled out that she was going to go get help, to stay put, and that help would be on the way. And then she started making her way back to that trail at a pretty quick pace. She had walked for about 150 yards and she realized that the forest was completely silent. She heard no birds, no animals moving about. And at that point, she got incredibly nervous because she does know that when the woods go quiet like that, it is a sign of a predator. So now she was getting even more nervous than she had already been. Then she realized that the air had an incredibly rank odor to it. She described this odor as being very metallic, very coppery. She said it smelled a lot like blood mixed with the smell of rot. She said once she smelt that, she said her heart started racing like crazy and she started in a full run right back for the trail. Once she got to the trail, she turned and she started running back to her car. As she was running down this trail, she could hear something incredibly large running through the trees off to her right behind her about 75 yards. The entire time, she did not want to turn around. She did not want to see what was chasing her. She just kept running. After she ran about a mile, her energy level was completely depleted and she felt like she had to slow down or she was going to risk fainting on this trail. So she kind of slowed down to a slow jog. And at this point, she started to hear from whatever was chasing her in the bush, it yelling, "Help me, help me, help me." She said it yelled it 3 times in a row, then it would wait and it would yell it 2 or 3 more times. As soon as it started doing that, she picked up the pace and she just started to run like she had never run before. As she ran a little bit further, she came to a bend in the road. Once she got to the bend, she started making her way around it, and this thing chasing her all of a sudden yelled out, "Help me, Helen, help me, Helen, help me, Helen." When she heard that, she mustered up all the strength she had left, and she just ran as fast as she could right back for her vehicle. The entire time as she was running that last 200 yards, this thing kept yelling her name and yelling, "Help me." When she got to her car, she jumped in, started it, and started to back up. And then she looked out her windshield, and standing about 45 yards away behind a large pine bough was this giant emaciated deer head standing about 8.5 feet off the ground, looking directly at her. When she first saw it, her first thought was that this was most likely from a bow hunter. Somebody had stuck a deer head up in this tree. But as she was backing up a little bit more, this deer head would turn and watch her as she was moving. She did not get a good look at the body. She did not see really anything other than this head that would move as she was moving. So once she hit the highway, she booked it all the way back to Winnipeg. She told her husband about it, and they really had no idea what she had encountered. They had no explanation for it whatsoever. Until a few years ago, they were on the internet and they discovered Wendigos. Now, her description of what she saw with that deer head does closely match description of Wendigos. Typically, they'll have two forms. One will be an emaciated humanoid with a deer head. The other one will be kind of an emaciated, pale white humanoid with large teeth. It kind of depends on which stories you hear. Now, she said that when she discovered this, she dug into it a lot more, and she discovered that it is a very common legend up in the northern parts of the US and in Canada. Now, before this experience, Helen did not believe in anything paranormal or anything cryptid related, but this experience really kind of made her wonder what else is out there. And when I asked her what kind of advice she would have to share, she said, if you're ever out in the woods and you hear somebody calling for help, she said, obviously first assume that this is a person and they do need help. She said, so do call out and try to offer assistance that way. But if that person is not responding the way you think that somebody in distress would respond, and you start to get a real bad gut feeling about the situation, she said, just get out of there and contact authorities. She said, just kind of always be aware that things might not always be what they seem. Well, that's it for today's encounter. If you have any comments on this, please leave it in the comments below. I really love hearing your guys' thoughts on these. I love the conversations that kind of develop. And as always, though, thanks for joining us. And if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.